Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin, a flash crash. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the Telegram channel, which you can find a link to in the description below. Let's go ahead and jump in. So, Bitcoin last night experienced a flash crash, and I was actually watching it in real time. I was actually trying to go to sleep at the time, so I did not get out of bed. But this is what it looks like, okay? And this, if you're, if you joined crypto in 2021, this is this is the downside risk, right? We've talked about before. And look, I mean, from the prior all-time high, Bitcoin is now down 40%. Okay, so it's down 40%. We did have a couple of these corrections, 40% corrections back in 2017. But what this reminds me of more so is March of 2020. Okay, it more so reminds me of March of 2020. And the reason, and we can go look back at March of 2020, it sort of, if you could pull the bull market support band here, we sort of have this bounce above it, right? And then we had this capitulation below it. But I would argue that this capitulation is not as bad as we had back then. Now, I know you're probably saying, well, it could get worse, and you could be right. But the point is if you take, say, the move from this top here down and over, and you just, do something like that, and then you overlay it, you can see there are a lot of similarities between that type of a crash. Now, fortunately, we did not go down to 25K, and I hope we don't go down to 25K, to be completely honest. But you can see how similar that move was, right? Down, up, sort of this last bounce, and then we had this capitulation. So what this reminds me more of is March of 2020. And I think there are going to be a lot of people who are going to assume that this cycle is over. And, while they could be right, I sincerely doubt that the cycle is over. As I've said before, I do think the cycles lengthen. And some people say, well, okay, maybe the 4-year cycle theorists now say, well, maybe it could go to Q1. As I've said, the cycle is probably going to go on much longer than Q1 of 2022, right? I mean, I think it's going to go way out into 2022. And as I've said before, I mean, it could go into 2023, all right, before we get like a 70 or 80% bear market. So I look at this, I do still consider it an opportunity. I think one of the things we can look at are these weekly candles, because I mean the wick certainly is pretty scary, but for the time being, Bitcoin is still at least above the 50-week SMA. Okay, and that is where we ultimately held the line back in July, is that 50-week moving average. So we're currently at the 50-week. Okay, we're currently at the 50-week. Note that the wick here, the wick took us down more or less to where Bitcoin previously held the line at the 20-week moving average back in September. Okay, so that's where the wick took us, back to where we held the line back in September. Historically speaking, we've never gone below where we held the line at the 20-week moving average. I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm just saying historically speaking, I don't believe it has ever happened. Whenever we hold the line, we typically do not go below it. Okay, so right now we had a wick to the prior area where we held the line. Not quite there. I mean, I think, well, I guess it depends on the exchange you use. Some exchanges, I think we did drop all the way to 40K, which was right around where we held the line. You can see we had a wick down to below 40K. But I mean, this one just had us going down to 41.6K. All right. So the weekly candle here is now down 17%. We went back to the 50-week. We're slightly below the bull market support band. Let's see what happens this weekend. Okay, I think we still have a little bit of consolidating to do here before we're gonna break out again. But I don't think it necessarily has to mean that the cycle is over. Okay, so I know a lot of people think that the cycle is just over and we're gonna go back down. I still do think that Bitcoin has a really good chance of holding some of these prior levels, right? 40K is a pretty big level, I think. I do think it would look somewhat scary if we came back down to 29K. That would look somewhat scary, I think. But 40K is where we held the line back at the bull market support band in September. Currently, we're trying to hold the 50 week, which is what we held as support back in July. Okay, so let's see what happens here. Let's see if we hold the 50 week. If we do, I mean, it's still technically possible that this is just a wick, right? I mean, technically possible is one thing, but what is it? I mean, it's already Saturday, so tomorrow's Sunday. We have a weekly close coming up. In order for us to get back above the bull market support band before the weekly close, we would need to get back up to over 51K, just shy of $52,000. So is there a possibility we can get back up to 51 to 52K? Yes, but I wouldn't necessarily bet on that, right? I wouldn't necessarily bet on that at this point. It looks like, I mean, normally when you get these types of moves to the downside, like if you go look at like the 1 hour RSI, which is, we don't really look at these shorter term time periods on this channel. You go look at the relative strength index. I mean, we've gone to levels we haven't seen in like forever on the 1 hour RSI. Let me make this a color. Sorry, let me make this a color that you can see a little bit better. So, I mean, it just looks like a complete capitulation shakeout, right? I mean, the 1 hour RSI went down to 8, right? I mean, the last time we went that low, we have to go back pretty far, right? And we have to go back pretty far to get to an area where the 1 hour RSI was as low as 8. And I'm guessing maybe March of 2020 is what's going to get us there. Yeah, 8, right? I mean, so we're basically talking about a March 2020 like capitulation. We haven't seen Bitcoin, get that bad that quickly, on the 1 hour RSI since March of 2020. And that was what I was saying, it looks like a very similar type of capitulation that we saw back then. If we go over to say the 4 hour RSI to see where we actually hit, we went down to 15 to 16. If we go back to see when's the last time we hit those levels, I mean, we almost hit it here back when we tested the bull market support band. But really, the last time was back in March of 2020. So this is a capitulation type event. Obviously, there's a liquidation cascade, or a cascade of liquidations, I should say, and a lot of forced sellers that were having to cover their longs and whatnot. But look, I mean, I do think Bitcoin, it is resilient, right? It is resilient. Let's see what comes after this. I don't think the cycle's over. As I've said before, if we go look at the 1 day candles, and we overlay the market cycle ROI of Bitcoin, I might already have it up over here. So if we overlay that market cycle ROI of where we are, right? This one, if we take a measured move here, so if we do a date range, right? So this one extended by about a year and a half from how long the cycle lasted. This one extended about a year, just under a year. So, look, I know a lot of people think, maybe not anymore, but I know a lot of people have been adamant that the cycle has to end relatively soon. Look, I mean, it could still go out for a long time. Like, we could go deep into 2022 or maybe even 2023. So I would say let's see where things happen. Let's see what happens this week, right, as we get into the weekly close. Let's see if we can hold the 50-week moving average. Obviously, going below 40K and putting closes below that would not be good, right? That would not be good, especially considering that is where we held the line back at the bull market support band in September. So that's what I'm looking at. I think the key things to take away right now are that it does look like a March 2020 light capitulation. We've seen Bitcoin oversold on some of the shorter term time frames, the worst that it's been since the March 2020 light capitulation. And we are currently at the 50-week moving average, which is where we held the line back in July, and we are just below the bull market support band. So let's see how things unfold. I know a lot of people are worried, but look, 2021, as we've said before, it's just a long accumulation year, I think. Obviously this was a distribution phase over here, and we ended up having a very long lull in the market, right? It took 6 months to get back up to the prior all-time highs. It took 3 months below the 20-week moving average, right? So what we're looking at now is we are back down to the 50-week. The 50-week now is about $17,000 higher than where it was back in July. So it's moved up a lot. So you can see that Bitcoin is at least trying to hold the line at 47K. If you're curious, where is the 50-week moving average? If you're looking at weekly time frames and want to see if we close above it on the weekly time frame, you need to be looking at around 46.9K. So we don't really have a whole lot of wiggle room here. Let's see if we hold it. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the Telegram channel, which you can find a link to in the description below. We also do the premium list up into thecryptoverse.com. Thank you for tuning in, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.